Hey Enneagram friend, I'm Abby, an IEA-accredited Enneagram coach and certified somatic experiencing practitioner. And today, in this episode, I share the coaching space with an Enneagram One that desires to better navigate all the concerns that come with parenting older children in their teenage and young adult seasons of life. We explore the feelings around being out of control and the worry that coincides with wanting to make things better or the best that they could be. We also take a gentle look at the emotions that come up in these moments of feeling out of control and use somatic body-based approach to bring awareness to those emotions. We also explore what self-compassion looks like in the Type 1 structure so that we can bring some calm to the chaos when life feels out of control. Okay, friends, I hope you'll listen in with curiosity and compassion and see what resonates in your experience. So as we start our time together, I'm curious what's on your mind? What feels most helpful for us to explore in our time together?
So as a typical Type 1, I've been thinking about this and I took some notes,
That's great.
And so, I listened to some of your previous podcasts, and of course I follow you on social media. And, the inner critic is always a thing, but I felt like maybe we could be more specific because you've talked to people about the inner critic before who are, clear Type 1s. And I thought maybe it would be most helpful to tailor that conversation about the inner critic to specifically talk about having such an inner critic and being a mom.
Yeah.
And so I thought maybe that would be a good area to explore or discuss. I am a Type 1 that lives with a husband who is a clear Type 8. And I have two older children, 22 and 16, and one is a 6 and one is a definite 7. And so we're all different, and we all really get along beautifully and for the most part complement each other very well. But being that Type 1, having that inner critic, I have been for the past 22 years, always second guessing and going back and backtracking and are we doing it the right way? Am I making the right decision? Did I say it the right way? How is this going to have a lasting impact on my children? Being who I am and raising them to be authentically who they are. So I thought maybe that would be a good thing to discuss.
Yeah, for sure. So as you talk through this aspect, some of what you said with the inner critic is the second guessing piece, or maybe the replaying or refining and questioning piece. So I'm curious if there's specific things that come to mind with regards to the inner critic kind of causing this effect to show up for you.
So I would say very specifically, being a teacher, I've felt confident in my parenting skills because when you're the teacher of little people and then the parent of little people, that kind of goes hand in hand. And so I of course would always second guess some things, but for the most part, I was pretty solid in what I was doing. And I felt a lot of my parenting choices were, based in science and fact and things I had studied, so I always felt good. And then when your children grow up and start to make their own choices and their own decisions, and then, you have a lack of control about what's going on, then there's a lot of second guessing about guiding them. So, we're at the stage in our family where we have a college student and we have a high school student getting ready for college. And so the choices and making choices and what would you like to do and where would you like to go and how much would you like to study for this test or how much effort and focus should we put in this area versus that area. So those are the kinds of things specifically as a mom that, cause most moms to stay up at night. And I think that they cause Type 1 moms to stay up a little bit more than others.
Yeah, for sure. So, I'm hearing you as you talk through this piece. Some of the undesirable impact it's having is maybe the worry part. So it's not just the decision making and how do we do this well, how do we move forward into adulthood well, but it's the maybe worry or anxiety or second guessing. That's the extension of it. So it's not just in the moment. It's I'm laying awake at night and I can't sleep because of this. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yes. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. 100%. And, and the tiny ripples, as a mom, you feel like the tiny ripples, what you cause now with the small pebble in the pond, and then the ripple effect on, oh my gosh, this is going to impact their entire life. That causes that very big dramatic, take a deep breath and say, oh gosh, I hope that, I'm laying the right foundation, and helping guide them in the right way, while still enabling them to be autonomous and make their own
Mhm.
choices. They're grown people, or almost grown people.
Yeah, but especially
So
with those ages, right? I mean, they're one of them is in adulthood and one of them is nearing adulthood.
right.
18 is adulthood. I know that we have kind of delayed it way past that. We think about adulthoods like when you graduate college or when you get married, maybe. But I mean, they're both right there, and so you're exactly right. Being a part of that, allowing them to establish some independence as they're moving towards the next season and next chapter. So as you think about this ripple effect and maybe the sequencing of if we make this decision today, where does that land? Is there a fear that's kind of underneath there for you? Is there a certain concern you're trying to avoid, a certain fear you have for what might happen for them? What kind of propels this concern about the sequencing out into the future?
I don't know. I don't think that I could say. And it, I guess it's a concern, or just like, wish for them to be happy, healthy, successful, financially secure. I mean, it's the wishes every parent has for their child or children. Um, but, for me, it's, I utmost want them to be happy, and have a sense of, purpose in their own lives. And, I worry about that. And I reflect on how I have, or can, or am impacting the choices that they make. So that's where my, inner critic comes in. And, if I could be in control of everything, then I wouldn't have to worry about it. But this is an area that is out of my control. And being someone who's happiest when they have all the boxes checked, this is hard. It's hard for me.
Yeah. So even as you say that, this is an area that's out of control for me. I like to have all the boxes checked. I'm curious what that feels like for you to say that. Like, is there a nervous energy that comes up in there? Is there another emotion that maybe couples that? I see a smile on your face, but sometimes that's kind of our way of like converting, the emotion to something that's more appropriate. So I'm wondering and considering what emotion comes up as you say that.
um what emotion comes up when I say that I'm the kind of person who likes to be in control and have the boxes checked?
Yes, with regards to, I feel out of control in this way.
Yeah, it does make me laugh, because I'm very self-aware, and I really do know that that is my comfort zone. And the people who know me best also know that that's my comfort zone. And I'm probably smiling because I get teased about it quite often.
Mm-hmm.
But I just I've accepted it. I try very hard to let go of some of the control at times. But honestly, it's where I'm most comfortable. And so, you talk about meeting people where they are and letting
Mm-hmm.
them be who they are. The people that I'm closest with understand that this is part of who I am. And so I believe, for the most part, that they have met me here and say, okay, well, and especially the people in my family, well, mom, she have 5 lists about this and a list about her list. And so, when we talk about this with mom, she's going to be, uber prepared. So that's definitely why I'm smiling. We have a
Yeah.
family of people who will tease each other with love, but and acceptance, but definitely it doesn't go on, nothing goes unnoticed.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and it's, you're kind of just describing the sense of meeting halfway, right? They're extending this compassion of knowing that there's this
Mm-hmm.
inner working going on, right? It's the list making, the planning, the sorting and organizing. And they're meeting you halfway in that, and they're
Right.
extending some grace and compassion. I'm curious though, with that, part of what's also happening is that there's this feeling of feeling out of control. And the type 1 response is often to do something about that, right? To fix it. And all the 9 types have the sensation, right, of something makes them feel uncomfortable, uneasy. It's going to be different things. And we try to resolve it or fix it. But I'm wondering, even as we talk about this feeling of being out of control, what that feels like for you. Like, what is the, even whether there's a specific thing you can recall with one of your kiddos as you've been navigating some of this future uncertainty, or even, something with your job, right? These feelings of feeling out of control. What does that feel like in your experience? What is there an emotion that comes
Physically,
up?
like
Yeah,
physically, what
or
does it feel like?
yes, an emotion or even a felt sense to it.
Well, there's a strong sense of anxiety, always a strong sense of, anxiety. And it physically feels uncomfortable. Like I get like would get a nervous feeling, and, pit in your stomach, nervous feeling, those are all feelings that I would get when I'm feeling anxious or something is out of control or something is, not within my ability to fix for someone or something. It doesn't even have to really be someone that I'm close with. Like you mentioned at work. So, I'm a teacher. So I, of course, want to help the children in my class and my colleagues. And I sometimes will come across as too intense. It's an intense kind of, and it comes from a place of wanting to help people, but it's, I would like to fix it. I would like to try it. I think that I have a strategy for you. That is 100% my MO.
Yeah, yeah. So even as you talk about some of these felt sensations of feeling nervous or knots in your stomach, as you talk about that, can you sense that right now? Like even as you're recalling this out of control feeling, can you feel
Yes.
the nervousness? Yeah. So just in
Yes.
this moment, just taking a minute to be with that sensation. So just allowing it to be there, not strategizing how to fix it, not strategizing or thinking through what might need to be done, but just acknowledging it almost of, yeah, I feel a little nervous. I feel a little concerned, worried, anxious, whatever language feels more appropriate. And even just offering yourself the kindness of taking a deep breath to just be with it. In through your nose and out through your mouth, just these slow breaths, just this kindness of taking a moment to acknowledge it, but also this moment of just, yeah, it's there, right? This is an okay response. There's things going on. I'm attentive to it. I notice it in the way that maybe others don't. And I'm also going to offer myself the kindness of pausing for a moment so that it doesn't sweep me away. So even as you just take a moment to be with it, what does that feel like now? Is there a shifting or even just something new that comes to mind?
Yeah, well, it feels, just by acknowledging the feeling, always just helps to feel, it normalizes it. It makes it feel like, okay, so there are a lot of people who felt this way before. It's not a big deal. You're not truly out of control. You're just experiencing this feeling for a moment. And then, it feels better to just sit. You mentioned something just now when you said noticing things maybe other people don't notice. That is something that happens to me all the time. And I say to, I have a specific person in my life that I say, I wish I could be like you and just not notice so many things, because you seem so much more relaxed and so much happier, in general, because you don't notice these things and they don't bother you, or they wouldn't impact you the way maybe those things would impact me. And that's true in many areas of my life, is that, I notice everything.
Yeah.
And I don't notice it and then let it go. So that's another area, to notice it and let it go and say, okay, that's a thing, but it doesn't have to impact me.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and the language that you're using is exactly right. I mean, the type one structure is just more sensitive to things that are out of place, things that are erroneous, things that are messy, things that are disorderly, things that can be improved, right? Sometimes it's just that's okay, but like we can make it even better, and it's just a natural wiring. Your attention naturally goes there. And there's a version of that for all the 9 types. There's these things that we notice that feel exhausting, whether you're a type 8 or a type 2. And I think that sentiment is shared by a lot of people of, gosh, I wish I didn't notice it, because then it causes this shame response or this anger response or this fear response. And it's tiring. It's tiring to notice those things. But I think in those moments, you use that phrase of let it go. And there is a sense and a gift in that if you're actually letting it go. Sometimes these things, we will notice them, they will feel frustrating or discouraging even. And we will let it go by telling ourselves, oh, you shouldn't be concerned about that. You shouldn't be worked up about that. You shouldn't be irritated or frustrated. Get over it. And sometimes the inner critic is really compelling that, like you don't have the right to be angry about this. And so in those moments, instead, offer yourself the kindness of, I am frustrated and I'm allowed to have that emotion, right? How I choose to respond from that emotion is a choice, right? That's a conscious choice we can make. But the emotion of coming up, of being discouraged or irritated or angry, it's just an emotion, right? It's nothing wrong with that. And so giving ourselves kind of this moment of pausing, noticing it, taking a few deep breaths as a way to kind of allow ourselves to be in the moment, and actually experiencing that emotion. Because if we just keep going and we just keep picking up the pieces and fixing things and shining them back up again, we're not really letting it go. We're just fixing our emotions along the way. How does that land as I kind of offer that back to you?
That makes sense. Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. It makes sense. And, there's a part that says you're letting it go, and then maybe you're just channeling that energy differently into, I love how you said, fixing it, shining it back up and putting it back out there. But you're right. There's a definite, there's lip service to letting it go and then truly letting it go.
Yeah. And sometimes we, especially with the type 1 structure, it's almost like you trick yourself into thinking it's not a big deal. You have this initial reaction of, this is really annoying, this is really frustrating, this is really discouraging. And then you almost logic yourself out of why you shouldn't have an emotional response. And then you do whatever it is that needs to be improved, fixed, picked back up again, and then you keep going. But in that process, you have missed the one moment of allowing yourself to experience the emotion, right? You've done all the other things. You brought on your doing intelligence, you brought on your thinking intelligence, but you didn't allow any emotional intelligence to come into play. And it feels like it's not a big deal, but the problem is a lifetime of all these small moments of not allowing yourself to experience your emotions. It's like a pressure cooker, it just keeps getting compiled up time and time and time again. And then there's these odd moments where it all comes out sideways, it all explodes. And, it wasn't about that one thing that made it explode. It was really about all these small moments of not allowing ourselves to experience the anger or experience the frustration or discouragement or whatever's coming up. So how does that land as I kind of offer that back?
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense because it's true for me in that, oftentimes it's fine. I'm fine. It's fine. It's like my magic phrase. I'm fine. It's fine. That's fine. I'm a it's fine kind of person. And then everything's fine until it's not.
Yeah.
And then it's not. And I'm not, I don't typically get angry. I'm not a person who would show my emotion that way, but I would get frustrated. I would be the first to get super frustrated and then start crying and then be upset with myself because I let myself get upset and I let myself cry. I would be that part, that would be me. And it doesn't happen often, but it does happen. And that's exactly the response of, saying it's fine, it's fine, it's fine until it's not. And there could be a lot of things, and a lot of little things, that could occur. And then, just the one thing, the cup runneth over.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, and even, we always talk about ones have a lot of different like synonyms for anger, because anger can feel so inappropriate. And so we'll say like, oh, I was just ticked off, or that was so irritating, that was so frustrating, that was so annoying. And really they're all just different words for anger. But sometimes anger feels so big. It feels like, oh, that is either inappropriate or like that's too big for how little this is. And it's almost like we don't validate our
Right.
human experience enough that we're allowed to be angry too. Like we get to have that experience. And so we make all these excuses and reasons why we shouldn't be angry. But the reality is like, we're just angry. That's just what's going on for us right now. And there's nothing wrong with that. We can choose to experience that, let it be, honor the fact that we picked up on something in the environment that is not as it should be. We have this deep response to it because we want it to be good. We want it to be right. We want it to be whole. And our type reacts to that. And if we can allow ourselves just to experience the emotion of it, then we can choose to move forward in a way that's more conscious, honoring both ourselves and taking that moment to experience the emotion, but then also honoring who we are in the world and how we want to show up with someone, being patient and kind and gracious, not as a, I have to be this way, but like, no, it is okay. Like this is a mess and it's okay. And we'll move through it together, not I will fix this for you because this feels so uncomfortable, or you have to fix this for yourself because I feel so uncomfortable. What's going on? But just allowing it to be an experience that you're just allowing yourself to actually experience it, not kind of pushing it down on the pressure cooker.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think part of the, response of always wanting to be good and do the right thing, being somebody who's being good isn't also angry at the same time. Like in a lot of places, that's that doing the right thing, being good. Sometimes I call it with my students the problem of being a good kid. And then we have so many kids who try so hard just to be good kids that they're afraid to make a mistake or take a risk. And so we're aware of that, or I'm aware of that in a classroom, because I see it. When you're with little people all day, you can really see, and some of the kids, you can connect with on a different level and say, oh my gosh, that would have been me. Like if I were 8, I would have handled that exactly that way. I can guide this with my experience. I can guide this child through that kind of emotional journey a little bit, because I know how that feels to be, afraid to take a risk or afraid to make a mistake or afraid for the perception of the adult to be something that wasn't favorable.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It's interesting. And it's interesting, again, to bring it back to the family and bring it back to being a mom, of how you're parenting people who may or may not be the same type as you, and being respectful of who they are while you're still, taking care of them as their parent with respect to the type of, what type you are.
Yeah.
So the dynamics are very interesting. And something that I've always been interested in looking into.
Yeah, for sure. And even, just to kind of retrace back a little bit, I love that you talked about with your role as a teacher, and I'm sure this happened when your kiddos were younger and your role as a parent. But kids are tremendous mirrors, both in things that we can reflect on what it would have been like in our experience at their age. But the reality is there's also an invitation there to offer the kindness that you're offering to that little kiddo, that 8-year-old in your classroom, to yourself. This moment of realizing, oh, this is probably really hard that they made this mistake. They might be feeling these things around it. Or I want them to feel comfortable trying new things and being adventurous and experimenting, right? And so I wonder what it would take for you to offer that same kindness to yourself in the present moment, not as you reflect back on your childhood experience, but right now as you are navigating parenthood, and it's sticky and messy with emerging adults, and these things that are not clear cut. There's not a rule book on how to do this perfectly or well. There's not, there's lots of things about how to, this type can interact with that type, but it's not a rule book. It's not a play-by-play of what to do. And so I wonder if you could offer that same kindness to yourself in this season, in this moment, at this age, rather than in childhood. How does that sound as I offer that back?
Yeah, it would definitely be interesting to reframe it that way and think about it that way when, I come across situations like that, because that's, it certainly makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even, if there are certain phrases that you find yourself consistently offering your students in the classroom setting around this sense of, making mistakes, cleaning up the messes, and it being okay, there not being judgment around it. If there are certain phrases that you use, even offering those back to yourself as a mantra almost, because sometimes in the moment it feels hard to fully offer ourselves compassion because the inner critic is on full blast, the volume's all the way turned up. But if we have these almost catchphrases that we know to be true because we've offered this compassion to the student in our classroom, to let those catchphrases, those mantras, those sayings, in those moments to be offered back to ourselves, sometimes even as like a rhythm of saying them over and over again. I'm curious, are there things that you feel like are a phrase you consistently say in your classroom? And maybe not. Maybe it's situational.
I can't think of anything. Yeah, I can't think of anything consistently that I say in the classroom right now off the top of my head. I'm sure that there are things that I say all the time. But, one of the biggest things I try to reinforce is that, mistakes are experiences for learning, and that's how you grow. We talk a lot. I talk a lot about to the kids about growing and moving forward. And, if you're always doing the right thing, you're not really going to grow until you try something out of the box. So that's, those are the kinds of things that I would say in the classroom. And I'm sure I could probably, reflect back and say those same kinds of things to myself.
Yeah. That phrasing is beautiful. Mistakes are opportunities for learning and growing. And I think that's a beautiful phrase that, like in your own language, I shortened it, but in your own language that you can offer back to yourself. Because in the moment when we are concerned, we're worried, we're thinking about what's the projection of this decision into the next 10 years, we're really dysregulated, right? There's something about this environment that's making us nervous, making us uncomfortable, and our nervous system is responding, our type is reacting. And so having almost these like centering sayings that we can offer back to ourselves of, it's okay, even if it's before the mistake happens, right? This is how I'm going to move forward. This feels most honoring of who I am and how I show up in the world. And even if it's not exactly right, mistakes are an opportunity for learning and growing, and it'll be okay. Offering this kindness to ourselves because you already know it to be true, because you offer this kindness to your students all the time. How does that land as I share that?
That is true. Yeah, no, that's great. That is great. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. I'm wondering in this moment, as you kind of hear those words, if there's a sensation that comes up in your experience. I feel like as I heard you share that about your students, I felt like this spaciousness, like this, like this is goodness, this is wholeness that you're offering. And I'm curious for you how that showed up in your experience as you offer that.
So hearing you say it back to me and reflecting on how I could apply that to myself, I thought of about 4 or 5 different scenarios immediately when you said that. And I felt a sense of calm. I did. I felt like, of course this is true. Like I know consciously that this is true because I say this to a lot of people. I give very good advice that I don't always take.
Yeah. That's great though, right? Being able to say this truth, it is true. You've already worked it out. You already have offered this compassion to others. The next step is just to be able to offer this back to yourself, right? because you already know it's true. It's not something new that you need to believe in. It's just to offer that compassion back to yourself.
Right.
Yeah. That's a
Right.
real gift.
Yeah. The sense of it is because the sense of holding yourself to a higher standard than you would ever hold anybody else to is foolish, but
It's
it's
there.
true.
Yeah, it's part of the makeup of the type 1 structure, right? It's there. And so just bringing some awareness to it so that it doesn't become so subconscious that it rules you without you having an awareness of it. And so in the moments when you notice it, just bring some awareness to it of, I see that. And that's not a fair standard. Or I notice what I'm beating myself up about, and that's ridiculous. I can't meet all of these demands, or I can't do all these things. I would never hold a friend to that standard. I would never hold a student to that standard, right? So these moments when you see it, to just notice it, to observe it, to bring some clarity to it, or maybe even levity, sometimes even being playful about it. We talk about like giving the voice of the inner critic a name sometimes to help separate it and to be more playful, so that it doesn't feel like this condemnation of like, what is wrong with me? Why am I doing this thing again? But of, I see my type 1 structure. It's showing up. There it is again. And I don't need to do that today. Like, that's not a fair standard for me. I would never hold others to that. And so I won't let it take over today. Like, no, thank you. We're going on to the next thing. Yeah. And so
Right.
I think
Yeah,
even
that's
circling
really
back.
great.
Yeah. And even circling back to this conversation about, navigating some of these big decisions that your children, adolescent and adult children are making, to bring the sense of calm back into those decision-making processes, whether that is things that you and your partner are talking through, and your children are not there, or spaces that you're talking through and navigating this with your children, to bring this sense of calm back into it of, mistakes and messes and errors are just a part of learning and growing, and it's okay. Like, we'll figure this out together. But allowing that gift of knowing this truth to be a part of those conversations too, both in the moment with them or with your partner if you're talking about your children, but then also in these moments that you're reminiscing and thinking about it in the evening, to bring some of that calm back into the space because you already know it to be true. It's just offering that compassion into it.
That's great.
Yeah. It's always too short of a time. There's never enough time to fully explore everything. But thank you so much for joining me in the coaching space and taking some time out of your teaching school day. But it's such a gift for me to get to be here and to be curious with you about how your type structure is showing up in your everyday life. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Hey, Enneagram friend. I'm so thankful for your curiosity in listening to this Enneagram coaching session. Although participants can learn a lot in just a brief coaching session like this, the transformational work really comes in a weekly coaching engagement with their certified Enneagram practitioner. If you feel stuck, discouraged, or overwhelmed by an aspect of your type, or maybe just a situation that you're trying to navigate, schedule a free discovery call with me at abbyrodriguez.com/coaching and see how coaching can help support you in your everyday life.